Welcome food fans, picky eaters, the flavor curious, and everyone in between. Nothing makes good food better than good conversation. And your table is ready. Come right this way to the Food For ThoughtCast with your host, Melissa Reagan. But you can call her Chef. All right, let's get this episode started.
Hi, welcome back to the Food for ThoughtCast with me, your host, Melissa Reagan. As always, you can call me Chef. I'm joined today by Ray Chmielecki. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. I want to ask you the same question I ask every guest every week. What is the most amazing thing that you ate this week?
It'd probably be Saturday night. We went to a new restaurant we have here in Columbus called Agni. It's from Chef Avishar Baru, who was on Top Chef two
Yes,
seasons
of course.
ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's his second restaurant that he just opened like a month or so ago. And yeah, I'd probably say it was lamb ribs that he had on their tasting menu.
That
I don't
sounds
know
incredible.
what exactly he seasoned them with, but yeah, they were amazing. So that was a fun experience that we finally got to go try his new spot.
That sounds incredible. I want some lamb ribs in my life right now.
Yeah, it was unexpected. I mean, they basically do it's a 5-course menu that you know what you're going to get, and then they sprinkle in some stuff in between. So I think it wound up probably being maybe 10 total courses if you break it out that way, with different stuff that they incorporated, small bites and whatnot. But it was a fun time. So yeah, and they're gonna, he's hoping to keep it a tasting menu concept, not going a la carte. So that'll be cool to see them. Columbus, we don't have a lot of tasting menu. I don't think we really have anybody that's strictly tasting menu only. We have a couple places that do kind of a prefix where you kind of choose your own adventure kind of deal with you get 3 options or whatever, but strictly
Right.
tasting menu only, it's just not something that is caught on here yet. For whatever reason, people are still a little apprehensive about it, I guess, or whatever. So hopefully that's coming, and hopefully we'll have more spots that just kind of do that, because it's just a preferred way, I think, for once you experience it and once you understand what they're going for, it helps the restaurant in terms of controlling costs and all that stuff too as well. But I think you also get a better experience out of it. Not that there's anything wrong with a la carte and picking your own
Right.
adventure out of that, but
A tasting menu is one of my favorite things to do. So for the listener, in case you don't know, prefix is where you will pay a predetermined amount of money for perhaps an appetizer, entree, and a dessert. Tasting menu is going to be really, the chef is kind of handpicking a culinary journey for you from start to finish, and the courses are going to be a lot smaller, and that's also for predetermined price. And I think that's one of the most fun ways to experience kind of a chef's vision, in other words, depending on where you're dining. But we don't have a lot of that in Dallas either. So I totally agree with you there. We need more of those everywhere.
Yeah, just the model makes sense. Just from a restaurant side perspective, you know exactly what you need to order, you know exactly what you got to keep on hand. It's easier to prepare for however many guests you're going to have on whatever night. You don't have to worry about there being a run on the chicken sandwich or the fish sandwich because of
Right.
Lent or something like that. So
Right.
it makes sense for the business side. And then, yeah, just from the consumer side, you show up, you don't have to worry about ordering anything. Pretty much the only thing you're going to have to worry about is if you have any food allergies or preferences, which hopefully you don't. I think some people take advantage of that aspect, and then it's basically, what do you want to drink? That's kind of the only thing they have to figure out. And
Right.
even then, you can just do a pairing, and then you don't have to worry about that. So
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think from for the economy right now, it would be a lot less unknowns to deal with, right? If you're using that kind of service model, then like you said, you don't have to deal with kind of those unknown entities. Like for some reason we sold 48 of this the other night. Now we don't have it, which those things do happen.
Yeah, and there's some restaurants that are really great at being able to navigate that with limited ingredients and like we have this, now we don't. But I think it's harder and I think it's a little I don't want to say off-putting, but it's harder if you follow a restaurant that does that like on Instagram, for example, and they put out like, "Hey, we have, this special tonight." And it's great, but if you don't get there, then it's like, well, you might never see it again. Will it ever be back on the
Exactly.
menu? And if you and human nature, if you miss out on 3, 4, 5 things that you're interested in, you get there and it's sold out or whatever, then you're gonna kind of be more apt to go, oh yeah, I was thinking about eating there, but like every time I try and go and I'm kind of looking for this specific thing and they don't have it or whatever. Do I really want to go there? You can kind of almost talk yourself out of going there in
Yeah.
a weird way. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the law of diminishing returns for your own, entertainment. I think there's that sweet spot that'll drive the demand. And then after so long, you're like, you know,
yeah.
your brain's going to go to something else. Tell us all about the Spoon Mob podcast.
Yeah, so I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, but started the podcast back in 2020. Was thinking about the concept before 2020, so didn't fall into it just because I had nothing to do or something like that. I know a lot of people did, but originally started out as a website. Even going back further than that, I actually started out as a travel guide.
Hmm.
And it was to the point where I was working on finding a publisher for it. I didn't know exactly how I was going to keep it up to date, how the information would still be useful 2, 3 years down the road when a restaurant closes or a tourist attraction closes or whatever. So built that into a website so I could keep it up to date. And then it was just kind of paring down the content to, what I'm really passionate about, what kind of focused on. And, me and my wife build our trips around food and restaurants. So it's, if you're going to New York, you know, there might be a restaurant that you're interested in eating at, but they're only open Wednesday through Saturday. And if you're only in New York, you know, Thursday through Sunday, that means you got 3 possible days that you could go eat there. But the Empire State Building's open every day. Like you can go
Right.
anytime between 8 and 5 to go to the top of the Empire State Building if you want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's raining or whatever, it's going to be open. So we kind of built our trips around that. And then it was just figuring out like places we really enjoyed eating. And then it was, well, who are the people that are actually making the food? You have some of these celebrity restaurants, their name's on the door, but they're never in the kitchen. And so, yeah, that's great. You think you're eating at, the celebrity's restaurant, but you're really not. And it's, Joe Smith who's running the kitchen and running the show, and it's actually his food. And just the celebrity chef, rubber stamps the menu or whatever once
Right.
a quarter or something like that. So then kind of getting into like who's actually cooking your food and like who's actually coming up with the menu and stuff like that. And, I was doing a bunch of research, and you find through the course of research that every press article that they ever do is different. And some will say they went to culinary school, and another one will say, well, they went for 1 year and then they dropped out. Another one won't even mention that they went to culinary school. It's like, well, what happened? So that kind of
Right.
gave me the idea to, have people on and be able to tell their story in their own words. So we kind of go from start to finish, really start to where they are now, essentially. And it's, how they got into the industry. And we have a couple questions we always keep the same. The culinary school is one, if they did or didn't go, and what they would recommend to somebody who's working for them now, is kind of a staple question. And we have some at the end too, as well, that we ask everybody. But other than that, I do an extensive amount of research on every single guest, as much stuff as I can find, and I just try and make the interview for them unlike any other interview that they've done, because most of the time they wind up bored with the same questions of, what do you like to eat? What do you like to drink? Why'd you name your restaurant this? Like, there's a lot of generic kind of newspaper magazine type questions that they all
Yeah,
get,
100% for sure.
and they all get really bored really quick. I remember we were at a tasting menu, kind of a pop-up tasting menu at a restaurant here in Columbus that's no longer around. This was a couple years ago, but the owner was there too, and we were talking, and he was just complaining about he did some press thing, and he was just like, it was the most generic thing. It was boring. I was like, and he was just like, I don't even know why they even wanted to do it. Like, they didn't ask anything original. There was nothing, like, you could have just read something else that I've
We're
never
just checking off a
done,
box.
and like you would have found all the answers to your questions.
Right.
You didn't need to talk to me. So that always kind of stuck with me. And I just try and create, the best experience, the most original experience that they're going to have. And then hopefully every other press thing that they do afterwards, they kind of compare to it. It's kind of always like the long shot goal, but yeah. And we've been putting out pretty much an episode a week since, the beginning of 2021 was our first, official chef guest. And I think we're at 110 episodes as of recording this. So should hopefully wind up, I think, by year's end of probably around 150 in total. Some are, return guests. We do some mini updates when they have a career update, move to a different restaurant, open a new concept, something like that. So we've had a handful of those people come back on when they have something to update, and we'll continue to do those. But 2/3 of it is all, new guests, first time guests who come on and, give us some time and are willing to chat about their career and share their story. So
Right.
we're always super grateful for, anybody that agrees to it and shows up at the other end of the Zoom. Because you never
Right.
know until, that day rolls around, stuff comes up for people and whatnot too. So yeah, and that's kind of where we're at now.
That's amazing. Congratulations for everybody out there. If you need another food podcast to listen to, Spoon Mom is amazing. I would encourage you to subscribe and download, rate, and review. Have fun listening to those. I think I'm only 4 short of being caught up completely. I kind of found it late, but it's really enjoyable and super well thought out. So congratulations.
Thanks. So how did you find it? I'm always curious. Like, did you just see an Instagram thing, or was it recommended, or what?
I found it on Instagram. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know that people.
Yeah. It was actually, it was in a friend's story.
Okay.
So yeah.
Don't read the reviews on Apple Podcasts. They're always the bad ones. Like, I think we have like 3 stars maybe, because it's all just like 5 negative things from like people. It's like they only leave negative reviews, so it's like whatever. It's all good.
That definitely happens, but you can't avoid it.
No, I don't take it personal. It just makes me laugh. You can't even like get them removed. It's funny because there's one on there that it's like, I think it's like a positive one, but it's not about our podcast. It's about something else. I think it's like This American Life podcast or something. And I'm like, well, this person either put it on the wrong thing or it's a bot or something, but I can't even get it taken down. So it's just this review out there that's not even for our podcast. It's like, what are we doing?
It's too late. It's yours now.
Yeah.
Like it just that's where it lives now, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Nobody can take that away from you, Ray.
Yeah, they can't take away the wrong review. Yeah. Stuck with it.
But it's a positive one.
Yeah,
I think it'd be worse if it was like bad and stuck there.
I think we have one of those too, where it's like, were you sure you got the right place? Like, I'm not sure. So I don't know. It's just, you see them every once in a while because you just come across them and it just kind of makes you laugh. Like, if you look at any other podcast, like you look at the review section, most of it is always like people just like hating on it. And it's like, okay. Nobody leaves positive reviews really. I mean, that's the whole Yelp model. That's why everybody kind of hates Yelp. Too as well, at least most people in the restaurant industry.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I can vouch for that. I think it's just a cesspool, to be quite honest. One of the things that I've discussed on this pod before with another chef friend of mine is that question about what's your favorite thing to cook is just overplayed, and it annoys me to no end. It really does, because I'm just like, whatever you're gonna pay me to cook is what my favorite thing is to cook. Or not.
And chefs get really bored too. So it's like, what your favorite thing to cook in that moment might not be your favorite thing to cook in 3 weeks. If you had to cook 1,000 of them between now and then, like, you'd be like tired of cooking that thing.
Yeah, I mean, if something's truly your passion, sometimes monetizing it will kill it faster than anything else. And then, you think about the scale that we have to produce food on. I don't know if you're going to call it your favorite after that. For sure. Tell me about the food scene there in Columbus. I've actually never been there, and I want to know what's going on. Is that where you're from originally?
So originally I grew up out in Massachusetts on Cape Cod and wound up in Ohio, like middle of 10th grade, up in the Cleveland area. And then after graduating college, moved down to Columbus. So I've been down in Columbus since 2000. 2011. So
Excellent.
that'd be like 12 years, something like that. So the food scene here in Columbus has grown. It's still corporate heavy. We have a big restaurant group called Cameron Mitchell. He founded a restaurant group years and years ago. The famous, most famous restaurant that he has is Ocean Prime. There's like one in Florida. That's kind of his
Yeah,
surf
I'm
and
familiar.
turf kind of. It's not fine dining, but it's a special occasion style restaurant. And a lot of people go there for
Yeah.
anniversaries,
It's a
birthdays.
destination dining, I think. Yeah, for sure.
So he's got a bunch of those spread out across the country, but he has something, I think, like 15 restaurants. I mean, he's got like 4 more on the way that he's opening in Columbus. So that's like the big restaurant group that we have here, the corporate restaurant group. We have a couple other things, Hyde Park Steakhouse, which is kind of regional. They have some stuff in Cleveland and I think Detroit and Buffalo kind of too as well. And there's a few others like that. But otherwise, it's a lot of corporate change still dominate the industry. Your Darden restaurants, which is your Red Lobster, your Olive Gardens,
Right.
all that stuff. Any restaurant that you could get a gift card for at a grocery store, we pretty much have.
Right.
And the claim to fame for Columbus for a long time was that it's a test market. So Columbus is, the cost of living's pretty low. There's a pretty diverse population. And then we're within like 1,000 miles of like 80% of the population in the US. You got New York, Chicago,
Right.
Those are all, I think Chicago's a 6-hour drive. I think New York might be an 8. Boston's, I think, about a 10 or 12, somewhere in there. So they're all really close. So a lot of corporations, Wendy's, which is headquartered here, I think White Castle has a headquarters here too as well. They would use this place, use the city and the population essentially as a test market. They would test out different, food concepts. And that would kind of dictate, depending on how well it did, if it made it to their national menu. I don't think it's as heavy as it used to be with that, but that was kind of how it started and where it's headed. I mean, we still have a lot of corporate influence, but there are a lot more one-off restaurants, sole proprietor restaurants too as well. So a lot of chefs, and we've had a lot of people move here too as well, or start to look here to open their restaurants. So BJ Lieberman, who ran Rose's Luxury and Little Pearl out in DC, both those were Michelin starred. When he was running the kitchen there, he moved here with his wife a couple years ago. They opened their first restaurant here, kind of middle of COVID, and then they opened up a jazz bar last year. They're going to be opening up a live fire restaurant sometime this
Amazing.
year too as well. So he moved here. Matt Harper is the executive chef at Commune, which is like the best vegetarian restaurant we have here in Columbus, and we don't have a whole lot, but it's a
I was
great
going to say
restaurant.
that's not a concept that I equate with Ohio at all, but
No, it's not, but it is. That restaurant would do great even if it wasn't here. If it was in Chicago or whatever, you transplant it to a different city, it'd still do great.
That's
but
awesome.
Matt Harper is the executive chef there. He spent time in Philly at Zahav, over the course of his career, so he wound up here. And then we've had a handful of other people kind of move from Chicago and whatnot, and Sebastian LaRocca, who just opened restaurants and with the Hilton.
Right.
He's from Costa Rica.
Right.
So he's had work. He worked for, he actually turned down Gordon Ramsay in London at his restaurant to work somewhere else. So we have people relocating here to open concepts, which is probably the first, real time in Columbus's food scene history that they've had that. So it's growing. And there's a lot of people I feel like that have one restaurant that they're on the verge of expansion. The Locks Bagel Shop, they were featured in Food and Wine's 50 Best Bagel Shops in America list a couple years ago, and they're
Nice.
tinkering on the edge of expanding. We have a burger joint called Preston's that Matt Hagen owns, and he's a local guy. And they started out as a pop-up, and then they went to a food truck, and then they were in a market stall. Now they're in the brick and mortar, and they're getting close to the point where they might expand to multiple locations too as well. So we have a lot of stuff that's on the edge of, having it in different parts of the city. So more ease of access and more people will be able to get to it and stuff like that. So
Right.
it's on the edge, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in the food scene, just because, like we just talked about, tasting menus are not really a thing here. There's a lot of places that people go to for special occasions, like once a year, but like one of our best restaurants that we have here, Veritas, I mean, they change their menu once every 2.5 months, and
Right.
they'll do a spring menu, but then they'll do like a 2 or 3 week kind of one-off supper club menu before they even do the summer menu. So they're doing like anywhere from 6 to 10 different menus, and that's not including like wine dinners and stuff that they'll create a whole new menu for.
Right.
So, but people go to that restaurant, but they might only go like once a year, even though they have the option, to try basically 10 different menus from them. And then there's also a whole bar menu that they have that's separate too as well. So
Yeah.
you could eat there once a month and get a completely different experience, but we just don't have people doing that as much. And part of that's the food scene and part of it's inflation. And we also have, I joke about it with a lot of people that are local that come on the podcast, but we have this weird thing in Columbus that people don't want to pay over a certain amount for a certain thing. So like
Right.
a burger, right? Nobody really wants to pay more than $10 for a burger. Like you
Oof,
get
that's
to
cheap.
anywhere over $10. You look at the Columbus, subreddit that we have, and it's just people complaining about the pricing, and it's like, all right, but did you do the math on the fact that it's, $6? Like, we'll just go on the conservative side. It's $6 for ground beef. It's going to cost you
Yeah.
$1 for a tomato, $1 for a head of lettuce, $1 for cheese. Like, you're going to be at like $12 by the time you even get all your ingredients for this burger. And you also have to pay somebody. If you're paying somebody minimum wage, that's another $6-7.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
like, just to break even on that burger, it's like $18.
Right. So a lot of people don't realize that when you're costing a plate out, that you're not only considering the cost of the items that go on a plate, but every single thing the guest touches, right? Like china, linens, sugar packets, etc., and then the labor that it takes for somebody to make it and serve it to you. So yeah, $10 for a burger is extremely cheap, especially with inflation and the economy the way it is now.
Yeah, and it's not even, I use burger as an example, but I mean, we have a baker that her episode hasn't come out yet, but she had to raise her prices, and she raised her prices to like maybe like $5 for an item, and it's still incredibly cheap. We have another baker here in Columbus who charges, I think it's somewhere between $10 and $12 for like an almond croissant, which is like crazy prices. Like, it's not New York City, so he's on the way high end of the scale. But then you have, this other person who's doing everything by hand, small batch bakery that's been around in their brick and mortar for a year. And she's putting out, this lengthy, compassionate Instagram post explaining to people like, yeah, we had to raise our prices by like 50 cents. Like, please still patron us and like, don't just stop coming in. And it's like, it's 50 cents. Like, I still think you're under what you could charge, but she's very conscious of, the neighborhood that she's in. And, if she raises prices too much, like that could drive her business for being such a young business. And
for sure,
I applaud her for, balancing that. And she's got some other things that she's exploring in terms of how to utilize and rent out her kitchen when she's not using it and stuff like that. But yeah, it's tough no matter what part of the food industry you're in. But for whatever reason, Columbus, and I think the Midwest as a whole, not including Chicago in that grouping, but there's just a certain limit that people will not go over for whatever item, and I get it. But at the same time, you have to understand that everything's more expensive. Like, it's not just food, gas is more expensive.
Yeah.
Everybody's car insurance is going up just because it's going to go up. Mine went up.
Yeah.
And the reason was, oh yeah, well, inflation and prices. It's like what am I going to do? I can shop around, but it's still going to be the same price.
Right.
It's
right.
not what you can do.
Right. I mean, the price of everything's really gone up. Well, it sounds like Columbus is on the cusp of becoming a food destination city, at least to be. Do you have any favorites there besides Commune?
I would say that, Commune is a great restaurant we have. Veritas is great. Chapman's is another great restaurant. That's BJ Lieberman's first restaurant. They were on, I think, the New York Times, like 50 best places in America list a year ago. He also just made, he was a semifinalist for the James Beard Best Chef Great Lakes category here too as well this year. So he was the only Columbus nomination I think that we had this year. We usually don't get too many nominations. Previous times we had James Anderson from our barbecue spot, Ray Ray's Hog Pit. He got nominated a couple years ago. And I think the owner of one of our pastry bakeries, he got nominated that year. But it's few and far between when we see James Beard Award nominations, which, it's great for the city. When someone gets nominated, I have my own personal issues with the James Beard Awards, but it's an honor, for the restaurant to be recognized, and kind of rising tide lifts all boats. So
yeah, same. I mean,
great to see.
I would say that I have a very nuanced view of those awards. I don't think that they mean nothing, but I also think that they hand them out indiscriminately at times. So
yeah, it's hard because it's, they changed around, or allegedly changed around, how they're determining who gets nominated based on like their voting panels and stuff like that.
Right.
But you still don't know who is a person that's doing any of the nomination or recommendations for the restaurants. I know you can go and write in who says, like, a fan or whatever, who you think it should be, but I don't know how much weight that even carries.
Yeah, I mean, I think the process just needs a little more transparency, to be honest. But
yeah, the one that's like the most transparent that I've found is Canada. They do a 100 best list, and you can go and you can look up and find out exactly. They posted on like the website who all their judges are that year. And you can go and see, and it'll say this person owns a restaurant, this person is a food writer for this magazine, and it'll just transparency. And it's like, oh, okay, well, at least like they know who's doing what, so you can kind of figure out. And I think that's kind of the way to do it, but they haven't done that, and I'm sure they have their own reasons as to why, both good and bad. So yeah, I mean,
for better or worse, right? But maybe someday.
if any of us ever got nominated for like a podcast, for a media James Beard Award, like, yeah, we'd be ecstatic. But I don't think that's the reason why any of us do it, and I don't think that's the reason why most chefs do what they do either. The awards or accolades, recognition is all great, but at the end of the day, there's very few that are like actually trying to win awards. And I think that's partially because there was a generation that's all they strive for. And then when either you don't get it, or even if you do get it, 20 years later, you're like, I did all that for that kind of thing. There's like this fading satisfaction, I guess, with it. And I mean, people handing back Michelin stars and stuff now in France and whatnot. So
yeah, I mean, I don't, as a chef, it's never really been on my list for the love every day. Like, it's for the passion for what I do. So I could tell you the last time it crossed my mind. I think it would be really cool, but then at the same time, like, you want to talk about transparency. Like, if I won an award for podcasting, and it would just be my mom writing in the same ballot over and over and over again. So just being honest. Love you, Mom.
Yeah, the podcasting industry itself there's just no rules to it at all. It's just all over the place. So
just the Wild West of self-promotion.
It is, and it's what sucks about it now is like, so when we were driving to dinner on Saturday, we had the radio on, and it must have been an iHeartRadio affiliated station, and they were promoting a new podcast by Rosie O'Donnell. And my wife goes to me, she's like, I thought she got canceled. It was like, who's asking for that? It's like, she needs to keep a paycheck coming in, and someone's going to give her money to do a podcast. And yeah, it doesn't matter if people listen to it. She's going to have like a year-long contract, and she'll be good for a year for like income, I guess. And that's the thing that sucks, is like celebrities figured out that, oh, I can do this podcast where I just show up, turn on a microphone for an hour, somebody else edits it, somebody else produces it, somebody else does all the social media. I don't have to do anything except maybe like probably don't even do their own social media, so they really don't have to do anything. And yeah, they'll make, 6 figures off doing that. And it's just like that ruined it for a lot of people where the space was just regular people coming up with
Right.
creative ideas, and then you would get somebody who, now, Joe Rogan, as controversial as he can be, he was a sitcom actor, a
Right.
B-level comedian. Like, stand-up's not great, and he
Agreed.
hosted Fear Factor.
Right.
Like he's the definition of like a C-list celebrity, and
Right.
he just tinkered around with the format, and then it snowballed and grew into something. And that's all that anybody ever really wants or hopes for out of it. Like
Right.
now you have all these celebrities who just want a quick paycheck, or are tired of doing straight to video movies or whatever, and they don't want to go get a real job or anything like that. So that's how they get their paycheck. And uh, it's that kind of ruined, kind of poisoned the well a little bit, I think. And it is what it is. There's always people jumping into whatever industry as soon as they figure out they
Right.
can make a quick buck. So
Well, I do really enjoy what podcasting has done for chefs, though. I think it's given us a different platform and kind of a leg up as far as social media is concerned. I mean, for better or worse, right? But I know that I've seen a lot of friends' success, not just affected, but a lot of friends of mine who are chefs, all over the country have certainly benefited from this. It's just awareness and like getting visibility out there, and I think it's a little bit easier, streamlined way, but you're right. Like now anybody can have a platform, right? For better or worse.
yeah, and I mean it's for better or worse, because there's stuff that could be a great podcast that you'll never find, just because it's so crowded, and there's only so much time in a day that you can listen to audio. It's kind of a crowded marketplace, with as much or as many podcasts are out there, and people are only going to listen to so much audio a day. So you can't, it's tough to get found and tough to kind of get people to figure out what you're doing and why. But I think once you find people, I think most of the feedback is positive. If they don't enjoy it, they're going to move on to something else. It's few and far between, like we were talking earlier, that somebody doesn't like the thing so much that they're going to spend their free time either posting about it or whatever. That's a lot
Or
of
hate.
effort for something
They're
that
gonna
you don't like.
they're gonna
Or
spend
hate
all their
DM
free
you or
time hate
whatever.
listening to it.
Yeah, I have somebody that maybe they stopped listening, hopefully, finally. But yeah, they were just like hate DMing me on Instagram, and I was just like, this is just crazy. And I had to block. I've only blocked, I think, like 3 people ever on Instagram, and
Wow.
like one was because was pretty confident that they were trying to piggyback off what we were doing with our podcast and basically just trying to copy it. So I blocked that person, and this lady was like the second or third person I blocked, just because it was like hate DMs. I'm like, why are you even here? Like, you don't have anything better to do with your time? Like, what are you doing?
There's a lot of space out there, like in podcast kingdom. Like there are so many different angles and concepts, and there's plenty of room for everybody. So that's dumbfounding to me.
Yeah, I don't really understand it. I mean, that's part of what I try and focus on is I don't really want to talk with anybody about, we'll talk about like some negative stuff that they encounter in their career, but I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time on like, oh, you work for this chef and, they got canceled because of the Me Too movement. Like, that's not fun. Yeah, it's just life's negative enough. Like, I don't think we need to add any more to it. Like,
Yeah.
we need to find like positivity as much as we can. And if you don't enjoy something, that's fine. Just go do something else. Like, but yeah, the hate watching or hate listening and stuff like that is, or like even like it'd be if you hated a restaurant so much, but you went there once a month. Like, why are you doing that? Like, if you don't like it, just move on and go find something that you do.
It's because people need Yelp material, though.
I never liked Yelp to begin with, so I feel like I'm on the right side of that argument, and that's great that it's validation that nobody likes Yelp, or it's nobody does anymore. Really, I don't think.
As a chef, I would rather hear that feedback from a customer or guest face to face, at least so we can fix something while they're there. Like, I've really never understood the value of posting a cautionary tale for everybody else.
Well, then there's like a whole lane of people that just make stuff up and post it in Yelp. Like I've seen stuff like that where they people have posted something and then the restaurant like basically comments on it and like, no, you actually showed up 15 minutes late for your reservation, and then you didn't like the fact that you were gonna have to be at a bar seat because you showed up too late for the table and it's a Friday night and we were completely booked out. So we gave away your table, but we still accommodated you even though you showed up late and you decided to sit down and
Right.
then get up and leave. Like it wasn't we kicked you out of the restaurant. Like you left on your own accord.
Man, as a single gal, you just said my favorite words. Like, you're going to have to sit at the bar alone. Okay, got it. Perfect. I would pay extra. I don't know. But I digress. We'll be right back. As a chef and a person who loves all kinds of food, I'm always looking for ways that I can emphasize quality over quantity without feeling like I'm missing out or depriving myself of the things that I love. And I love pasta. Carbonara, mac and cheese, primavera, cacio e pepe, you name it and I'm all about it. That's why I choose Bonza. Bonza is the pasta made from chickpeas, which means it has more protein, more fiber, and I believe more flavor than regular old pasta. Seriously, if you go in my pantry right now, there are 2 boxes in there awaiting their next culinary adventure. Bonza has over 12 different kinds of pasta, including penne, rotini, elbows, and cavatappi, which is my favorite, because all of those curves and ridges hold even more delicious sauce. Bonza also makes pizza crust, which tastes too good to believe that it comes from peas. You can find Bonza at Whole Foods, Target, and Walmart. What can you tell me about barbecue in Columbus? You mentioned a restaurant when I asked if you had any favorites, and I don't know if there's any regional difference. Of course, I'm from Texas, where there's a huge, barbecue is a huge thing, but it's a very specific kind of barbecue. So now you've got me curious.
So the main barbecue place we have here is Ray's Hog Pit, which is the one that was nominated a couple years for a James Beard
Mm-hmm.
Award, and they've been on like best food truck lists and best Midwest barbecue lists too as well. And they just started a supper club that is still barbecue influenced, but it's not strictly barbecue that they do, and they do
Got it.
um, one-off dinners basically like every Friday, I think, and they'll pair with some sort of cider place or winery or whatever.
Sure.
And they kind of build a dinner around it, but they're kind of the most known one. There's a bunch of other places. I mean, there was a place they're kind of restructuring that it was founded by some former OSU football players called the Pit. So that's kind of in a bunch of different food halls and stuff like that. They kind of shut down their brick and mortar stuff. And then there's just a handful of one-off people that do some barbecue. I mean, we got a guy that his name's Akil Steele, and he started a barbecue place. It's kind of a food truck thing. He's got smokers out and kind of like this vacant lot, very similar to like how
that's the way to
Franklin
do it.
started.
Yes.
Down in Austin, and he partnered with a restaurant for a little bit that didn't have a food program, so he's doing stuff in there, and then they started their own food program. So now he's kind of bouncing around a little bit. Somebody
Nice.
stole his generator at one point, I think.
That's
so that kind of
terrible.
shut him down for a while. But so you have people like that are just kind of bouncing around, smoking stuff and like that. So we don't have like a defined style. I would say Midwestern barbecue is probably just a compilation of all your styles, your Kansas City,
Sure.
your Texas, and then all the different Carolina styles. I think there's like 4 or 5. So there's no real
Indeed.
definitive like way that anybody does it. It's just kind of whatever model that they kind of enjoy. It's kind of based off one of those, and then just kind of tinker with it from there. But I mean, then up in Cleveland, you have Michael Simon has a barbecue focused restaurant, Mabel's BBQ. I think there's one in Vegas now, and he's got one in Detroit too. Um, and then Cincinnati's got a couple barbecue places too as well, but it's nothing. It's nothing to the point that like Texas has or South Carolina. I mean, the best barbecue I've ever had is still it'd be either this place. He's no longer there. It's called Buxton Hall Barbecue in Asheville. But the chef, he separated from the restaurant, I think like a year ago, just
Right.
due to creative differences or which way that they were expanding. It'd be either that or Franklin's Barbecue, because they were on Gold Belly for a while, and we ordered a brisket from them,
Mm-hmm.
like cooked it ourselves. I mean, they give you instructions that are
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy, but it was still amazing, and that
I
wasn't
mean,
like firsthand either.
Aaron
That was
Franklin's
us doing it. So,
barbecue genius, and if you can get that model to work in somebody's home, like you've really done it. I mean, if you have everything figured out so far that your directions can create that same product. I mean, it's like that's it. You figured it out.
yeah, I mean, it was still delicious. So, they came in basically a vacuum sealed package.
Mm-hmm.
They had already basically smoked it, and you're essentially reheating it, and then if you want to put the barbecue sauce that they give you on there or whatever, or on the side or whatever you want to do. But yeah, I mean, it was great, and didn't have to wait in line for 3 hours to get it.
But that
So it
wait
was
is
worth it.
the wait is worth it, and the camaraderie in the line is like nothing that you could recreate. All like-minded individuals. I knocked out a game of Monopoly once, waiting in the line. That was like, yeah, no joke. And I believe that day I only got brisket, and they were out of pulled pork, and I was really upset. But it is what it is. That's why you have to go back. You have to go back multiple times.
Yeah, I hate waiting in lines, so it's like if it costs me an extra, like, well, because before I read that there was a way that you could order ahead. I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks out. You could order ahead, so then you could skip the line and just pick up your order.
Hmm.
It costs you more money, but it's like if I don't have to wait 3 hours in the line, so I could go eat the barbecue and then give myself time to digest it, so I can go eat somewhere else. Like
Right.
I would rather do that than spend half a day in a line, no matter how delicious the barbecue is.
For
If I
sure.
can fast pass this some way, like I'm probably gonna do that.
They didn't always have that option, but yeah, no, I totally see what you mean. But it's definitely worth the wait. Now you've got me interested to go on a barbecue crawl through Ohio because now I want to see like, is it dry rub? Is it wet rub? Is it ketchup based sauce? Is it vinegar? Like, I want to try to compare it to all the other regional types. I'm kind of a traitor to Texas barbecue myself because I don't want ketchup in my sauce. Ketchup's for French fries. It's a little bit of a hot take in this state, but yeah, I like a vinegar and acid mustard based sauce. So I'm much more at home barbecue wise, like on the East Coast.
Yeah, the only thing with barbecue for me is I don't I don't really want it when it's like 90 degrees. Like it's the last thing I want. And that's also ramen falls into that too as well. Like
That's
I
how I
don't
feel about red wine.
really
I feel
I
like
don't
nothing is less refreshing than a huge Cabernet on a 103-degree day in Dallas. I'm just like, no, thank you.
yeah, I mean red wine at night I could do, but like in the middle of the day when it's like 100 degrees, like nah, I don't think so.
No, I feel the same way about ramen. I can't. It's got to be at least below 80. I don't know. I gotta be real desperate.
Yeah, I mean it's a wintertime food. Yeah, summertime is just not what I want.
We're having fairly temperate weather here, and I recently, so a Saturday night with the family, we went out to an izakaya restaurant, and I had mapo tofu, and it was a little bit more brothy than it typically is, but it was served in this cauldron, and this thing was so hot, I actually ended up ordering an entire uh, water glass full of ice cubes and just dumping it in there so that I could eat it. I was like, I want to eat this today. Like it's hot. I was like, it is hot. I mean, it was kind of chilly outside for Texas, right? Like it was in the 70s. We call that light sweater weather here, but because we probably see ice like, once a year. But yeah, I mean, it was so hot I couldn't even mess with it. I was like, this is why I don't do like hot soup either in the summer. Like it's just I have a time constraint. Chefs never get to sit down and enjoy a meal. So it's like, I can't eat this over a trash can in 3 minutes, so it's not going to work. You know, like it's not going to do it for me.
No, yeah, I understand completely. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. The warmer it is, the less interested I am in super hot, temperature food for sure.
Yeah, well, the science says that it cools you down, supposedly, right? Because it causes your body to sweat, and the evaporative cooling like makes you feel cooler. But I don't really buy it. And I've had a couple of line cooks over the years that drink boiling hot black coffee just by the gallon when it's 100 plus, degrees outside. I'm just like, I'm not buying it. I'm just gonna drink
Yeah,
ice water. Like, I'm good.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
Like, me and the science don't necessarily see eye to eye there, but that's fine. It's all relative at that point, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So coming over from Massachusetts, like, what are your earliest food memories? Do you have any fond food memories of growing up part of your life on the East Coast?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the 90s, so I mean, we would go out to eat, but it wasn't like it was, I think, in the mid 2000s, before the financial crisis, where I feel like a lot of people were eating out like heavily. We would eat out as a family a little bit more than like a special occasion thing, but it wasn't like a majority of your food consumption. I mean, the majority of it was my mom cooking at home.
Sure.
And then, I grew up in a place, I went to school in Provincetown, but, lived in the next town over, Truro, and there's nothing really there. I mean, the nearest fast food place that we had was a Wendy's, which was probably like 20 or 30 minutes away. So
Hmm.
everything was local, sole proprietor, mom and pop kind of owned stuff. We had a Ben and Jerry's ice cream shop downtown in Provincetown. But then I remember when Subway wanted to open a store, that was like a big deal, and it got shot down like a number of times before it finally got passed through. But people didn't want it. They were like, they just didn't want chain restaurants there. And I mean, that's still that way to this day. The Subway's still there, but it's not like there's a McDonald's or anything like that. Like, you have to go a half hour down the road to even get to one of those. So
It still kind of has that small town feel.
yeah, even though, I mean, it's been being taken over by a lot of the wealthy folks that use it as summer vacation spots or summer houses and stuff like
Sure.
that. Which is inevitable, I guess, for any place that's on the waterfront, that has decent weather in the summer, probably. So, but I would say, I mean, we would have, and it was kind of featured in one of Anthony Bourdain's episodes when he went to Massachusetts, but Spiritus Pizza, they would do a free slice day. So, when you were in school, after school, you would go down there, you get a free slice of pizza on that day. But I mean, we had a couple different pizza shops. The Lobster Pot was a place that Anthony Bourdain worked back in the 70s,
Right.
just as a line cook. That's still there. That I believe is actually up for sale. If you have, I forget what the sale price was. My parents told it to me because they go back like twice a year, because my aunt still lives there in Provincetown. But I think it was something ridiculous, like I want to say like $14 million or something like that was what they
Wow.
put it up for sale, and it's not worth that. It's not. But that's what they listed it as, I guess. So if anybody has a handful of millions of dollars laying around that wants to own a restaurant and make somewhere between 2 and 5%, I guess go for it. But
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
If that's your dream and you've got money to burn, then why not
yeah,
jump it into
yeah.
that?
It probably needs some renovations and stuff like that. I
For
mean, it's
sure.
a great spot, but it's just the problem with that area is you're busy from Memorial Day to Veterans Day, but then outside of that window, the local population isn't enough to sustain a business. A lot of businesses shut down for a
Yeah,
couple
it's
months in
all
the winter.
seasonal and cyclical, right?
Yeah, and I mean, a decent part of the workforce was, for a lot of places, they would come from like Jamaica. They would get a work visa for like the summer, and they would come and they
Hmm.
work in the summer, and then they would go back to Jamaica in the winter, and work there and kind of do that. And that was, where a majority of the workforce came from. for restaurants and shops and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, the local population is dwindling. There's not as many kids there. I mean, they shut down the high school that I went to.
Wow.
That's no longer around. So, um, it's slowly becoming more of a tourist, destination, which it already was to that, but there's just way less of a local population. And as the older age group, moves away or passes away, if it gets left to any family members, they're probably not in the area. So it's like, do you want to keep a house and the property taxes there that you're only going to use a couple times a year? Or do you sell it for a couple $1,000,000
Right.
and,
Yeah.
do what you want with that money? Whether it's invested for your own retirement or your kids' college or who knows. So that's kind of
Yeah.
the big, and that's a big thing here in Ohio. It's from the land standpoint where we have all these, and you have it, I think in Texas too, where you have all these farms and the family farms, and the kids have no interest in farming, and when the parents retire or don't want to do it anymore, can't physically do it anymore,
Yeah.
what do they do with the land? And they wind up selling it. And here in Ohio, it basically winds up becoming apartment complexes, 401 apartments.
Condos,
And
apartments. Yep.
and then that's it. So then you lose a bunch of small farms and stuff like that. So it's a whole thing. And I don't think it matters what state, you have that aspect where they're just building a bunch of apartments on whatever land that they can get their hands on, whether it's Dallas, Austin, or Columbus.
Yeah. I mean, it's really happening everywhere, where the farming, subsidy or the farming, industry, as it were, is in danger. And we're going to have to rely on like corporate farming and corporate farming methods for food sources. And it kind of sucks.
Yeah, and we'll see how far that gets and where that goes, because it's kind of unpredictable territory. It's uncharted. It's never happened like this before, so nobody really knows what to expect.
Yeah. It's just in this last generation and a half or so, I would say.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons why, like, one of the questions I always ask the guests is about, if they didn't go to culinary school, why, or if they would recommend it. And it's not so much like we'll talk about, why they chose the school that they did or whatever, but that's not really the point of
Right.
the question. The point of the question is to kind of figure out where they stand on education. Because for me, in my generation, it was you have to get a college degree just to basically be on equal footing with everybody. You have to have a bachelor's,
Yep.
and it shifts back and forth between how much education you have, and then the workforce will shift to how much experience you have. And I think right now we're in an experience heavy part of the workforce sector where everybody's looking for somebody with previous experience over education, but it'll flip back. But for me growing up, is you had to go to college, you had to have a bachelor's degree at least to be at least on equal footing with everybody that you're competing at. But my dad was in the military. My mom didn't go to college. She went to like dental school for like I think a year or something like that, and got a
Hmm.
degree. But they never went to 4-year school or anything like that. And now you look at it and is it worth going to a 4-year school when chances are whatever you get a degree in is not what you're going to wind up doing? So many people, we've had 3 or 4
Yeah.
people that were like
Exactly.
in basically starting or just into law school and were like, I don't want to do this. And they wound
Hmm.
up working in restaurants because that's
I
what
went
they
to
cared about.
in culinary school of all places. I went to culinary school with a few people who were like, my parents are making me do this. And I was like, man, this is all I ever wanted to do. But somebody put it in my head early on, um, not family or friends, but in the public school system, that I wouldn't be able to be a chef without a culinary degree. And so that's what I had in my head. And when I got to my first job in the business, I was like, well, either they were really, really, really wrong, or I'm the only one that's right, But I tell people like, hey, that degree didn't hurt. It looks great on my resume, and it probably got my foot in the door the first couple places. And, it was really important. But yeah, it was the same as your experience, right? Like you have to have a college degree, and that's the only way to do it. Whereas now, There's trade school, there's internships, and those things were always around too, but there's less of a stigma, around taking some of those alternative routes to wherever you want to get to.
Yeah, growing up, I mean, we had a trade school that was not too far away, and it was always a stigma with it. Like it was labeled as the kids who couldn't cut it in one of the other high schools wound up going there. Like your grades were so bad, you had to basically go to the trade school. That was your only saving
Yeah.
avenue. And I mean, look, I mean, yeah, there were kids that wound up going there because they had bad grades, but there are also kids that went there because they chose to go there too as well. So it was, but you never really got that side of thing, and that was kind of the stigma that went with it. And now you're seeing a correction, I think, where people are exploring trade schools now because that's where the available jobs are. Where if you try
Yeah.
and get into an office or corporate environment, it's a lot harder, and chances are, you're going to just bounce around a bunch too as well.
Well, COVID kind of flipped everything on its head too. In our business now, you can't, well, every industry really, but before, I would say in the before times, we would look at resumes for people who are coming out of culinary school and be like, they don't have any experience. Or we would look at resumes of people who have been in the industry for just a little while, and we would naturally go, I mean, just like any hiring manager would, right? Like, hey, there's a gap of this long on your resume. Well, nobody can really do that now. It's not really a valid, like, you can't gatekeep in that way now. But then also you have people who are trying this as a new career because they don't really have any options left, depending on what they were doing before the pandemic.
So you can't be as picky with resumes anymore because so
Absolutely.
many people left the industry. So now, where maybe as a chef, you would want somebody to have 2 or 3 years or places on their resume, like if they were at a place for like 6 months, that's like good enough.
It's a lot harder to get 2 or 3 years of experience under your wing, especially if you're not coming out of some sort of, externship program. And then you have people who didn't really discover their love for cooking, or maybe they never tried something until during the pandemic when they were home and they had nothing to lose. So it's like you have a lot of people who never tried to do, bread or baked goods, or now you have a lot of people who are running cottage industries out of their home where they weren't before. And that's a big part of our business that's like booming now. Whereas it used to be a lot of barriers to entry, in other words, right? Now it's a lot easier.
Yeah, you can kind of do proof of concept from your own home now. And I mean, there's a bunch of people that got into baking bread and stuff during the pandemic. I think a lot of that has trailed off, but there's some people that have entered the industry because of that, because they had time to explore other things when they were home and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, overall, I think the pandemic, yes, was a bad thing, but there are little silver linings, things that have come out, whether it's people exploring an industry that they would have cared about, or baking bread from home, or we've had people that were going to open a restaurant, and that 6 months that they were forced to delay actually helped them kind of perfect their concept. And so there are some silver linings, but I mean, yeah, overall, it wasn't a great thing, and I don't think anybody really wants to sign up to repeat that anytime soon. So.
No, no, absolutely not. I just always like to reflect on how it changed things. I don't know, for the better or the worse. But what's next on Spoon Mob podcast for you?
So, I mean, more episodes coming out. We have some Columbus focused folks coming up. We got some returning guests, a couple sommeliers that have been on before that are coming back on. We got new business ventures that they've entered into. So we'll have them coming back. We're going to have, usually I feel like it's once every 20 episodes, I wind up having a sushi chef on just because I'm a big fan of sushi. So going to have a
Me too.
sushi chef from New York coming on. He does things a little bit differently. So that'll be interesting for people to hear too as well. And yeah, I mean, we have a finalist for this year's James Beard Awards. His episode will be
Excellent.
dropping in a couple weeks too as well. And yeah, we're just probably maybe a week or two from now, we'll do another block of reaching out to a bunch of people. We kind of keep a running list of people we come across that are doing interesting things, or food that we tried or whatever, and we just kind of reach out to them and see if they're interested in coming on. And surprisingly, it always amazes me that we get as many yeses as we do. It's always kind of shocking, and then yeah, we'll keep recording. So that's kind of how I approach it, is just trying to find people that, you know, we've either had their food, they're doing something interesting in the industry that we haven't really encountered, or most people haven't encountered, or they're just somebody that got recommended that we wind up being a fan of, or whatever. So
Right.
we never really write anybody off. I mean, I there's a very small list. I think it's maybe 5 or 6 names long, that will never appear on the podcast, and that's just because they no showed like an exorbitant number of times. So they are
Hey,
marked in red.
It's the
And
same as anything else, right? Like if you do that a couple of times, then there's some consequences that go with it.
yeah, it was abused on their end, for the amount of times that they did not show up.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. Have you ever been really starstruck by a chef who's come on your podcast?
Um, I wouldn't say starstruck, because once you start talking to somebody, it all kind of goes away. I'm scheduled to do an episode with someone. You still get, or at least I still get, that thought in the back of my head of like, they're not going to show up. And they show up. And it still kind of amazes me that it's like, oh, wow, like this person is down to do it and showed up. Like, so you still have that, I don't know if it's anxiety or apprehension or whatever, but
Yeah.
I think if you don't have that, then it just means like you're kind of mailing it in and you stop caring. I would say the person I was most surprised, I'm trying to think, like, there's been a few people that I was surprised that they agreed to do it. Like, Christopher Bates, I was surprised. He's a master sommelier. He was the first master that we had
Yeah.
on, and I was
Yeah.
shocked, that he agreed to, and I was like, yeah, showed up 2 hours, 15 minutes, something like that. Was like the length of his episode. So
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
and I would I think Derek Wilcox, I was surprised too as well. He was a sushi chef in New York for a long time. He's out in LA, like doing great things there, and I was shocked. I felt like a lot of people like knew about him, but not his story. But maybe that wasn't the case. But yeah, I was super surprised, and then like he wound up having to run to the restaurant, so we actually had to record that over like 2 days, and I was just like, oh man, please come back, like so we could actually finish this. And he did, and it was like another hour, and it was great. I mean, it was an awesome episode. So we've had stuff like that, but I don't think I've ever been starstruck. I mean, yeah, not yet. I think once you see them at the other end of the computer screen,
Yeah.
then you're kind of just flip into like interview mode kind of thing.
Sure. I get that. I'm a chef who still I get a little nervous around my heroes, but I totally understand that, because you end up meeting people at like food and wine festivals or openings or events, and you go like, oh, but I've always considered that the chef's uniform kind of looks like a superhero costume. And so something inside me can't shake, like, it was 18-year-old me who was idolizing all these other chefs, and I still do, but now I just, admire. It's just healthy admiration.
How comfortable is a chef's coat? Because it reminds me a lot of like Japanese style, where they have
Sure.
similar kind of things. But then you see somebody like if you watch Top Chef, like Tom Colicchio, like he's always walking around in a chef's coat. It's like it has to be relatively comfortable for him to just constantly be walking around with that, like jeans and chef coat on.
Yeah, they're super comfortable.
Okay.
I equate it to like, I always tell people, it's kind of like wearing a coverall, like a chef pants and a chef coat, because now you're indestructible. Like you can get anything on there, like, because it's supposed to. It's. I don't know. I have a hard time keeping a white coat clean because I'm always busy and working. I always have to be in the middle of everything, so it's one of those things. And I don't know, some chefs wear aprons and some chefs don't. I don't like them. That's a lot of clothing to have on. I don't know. It just kind of depends on what I'm doing. But yeah, like, I don't know. I feel kind of invincible, and they're super comfy. I'm that guy that's always going out to eat in my uniform. I don't bring clothes to change into. So typically, if I'm hitting a bar on the way home from work, or if I'm going to another restaurant, it's in a chef's uniform. because you also need to get that, industry discount too. So you got to let them know that you're legit. You show up in a uniform. So yeah, it has its perks, but yeah, no, they're super comfy. At least the ones I'm wearing are. I would be the worst.
That's what I always assumed, but I don't think I've ever asked anybody that question. So it seemed like one I could slip in there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's one I've never gotten for sure. Thank you for asking. Yeah. I mean, if you starch them, they can be a little bit, itchy, but at that point you're the master of your own destiny. You know what you did. So, but yeah, no, comfort for sure. I tell people I don't own a lot of other clothing. It's actually not a lie. So because I feel most comfortable in it. Tons of chef coats and chef pants. At some point they're like pajamas. Truly. Say it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, Ray. Where can we find you online?
Yeah, so you can follow us. Mainly we use the Instagram, so it's just @SpoonMob there. All the other social media, it's either SpoonMob or SpoonMob1. I think like Twitter and Facebook, but we mainly use Instagram. Everything else is kind of just linked through it. So follow us there. We post food photos from places, that we visit. We pretty much try and revisit everyone that we can over the course of a calendar year, at least once they come on the podcast, just to kind of help promote the episode, a couple months down the road, or whatever. And
yeah, for sure,
help support them. But we'll put stuff in our stories too, as well, from, restaurants that we haven't had on the podcast, or people that aren't affiliated with the restaurant that they've been on the podcast. But you can check out our website too as well. We have links to all the episodes. We build out a chef page for every guest, so we put all the food photos there too as well, so you don't have to scroll all the way through the 300 posts that we have on Instagram if you're looking for something.
It's actually a really well done website, and I appreciate that. There's nothing worse than, your website is basically like the jump to recipe button that I would use on other people's websites to kind of like cut through all the crap. So yes, it's very well put together.
Yeah, and that's great to hear, because I audit that thing like once every couple of weeks just to make sure like functionality is still working, and we'll incorporate any updates too as well. If somebody came on the podcast and like 2 months down the road they wind up leaving the restaurant or opening a new concept or whatever, we'll put a little blurb in there under the link for the episode to kind of keep it up to date. And then once they ever come back on the podcast, we'll talk about it, and that gets folded into the next episode, and then we'll delete that and just put the link to the next episode up there. So kind of like a running note list there too as well. But we broke it out in 3 sections. So it's a chef section, a sommelier section, and then kind of anybody else who's affiliated with the hospitality industry in some capacity, whether we've had a chocolatier on, we've had a seafood purveyor on, a cheesemonger. So those all kind of fall in the third category.
Right. And the other category.
Yeah. And then it's just whatever the latest episode was, that's at the top, and then the oldest ones are at the bottom. So that's kind of how that's formatted. And you can write in, we got a contact portal up there, so you can write in questions, comments, feedback. If you ever have a question that you wanted to ask a chef but never did, or a sommelier or whatever, you can write it in, and we'll incorporate it into one of the upcoming episodes, kind of whatever fits best. And then we'll let you know what episode that is, so you can kind of keep an eye out. It's kind of how people that listen can, if they want to be part of the podcast, they can choose to do so. And so that's kind of a cool thing that we adopted. But yeah, and then you can just follow the podcast, whatever platform that you use. We're on everything.
Awesome. Well, as usual, food fans, all this information, links to Spoon Mob Podcast, a little bio about Ray, and everything else will be at the foodforthoughtcast.com and all of our online spaces. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye. That's a wrap for today. Until the next episode of the Food for Thoughtcast, make good food, eat good food, share it, and be kind to one another.
Thanks so much for listening today. You are part of what makes us special, and we are so glad you joined us. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. Just like food, delicious podcasts are better when you share them with others. Come back for seconds wherever podcasts are served, and we'll catch you in the next episode of the Food for Thoughtcast.
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at the Food For ThoughtCast or at www.foodforthoughtcast.com, where you can link to all podcast players, or you can send us an email at foodforthoughtcmc@gmail.com.